president as well. Then the demonstrations will go back home and celebrate the new democratic free Egypt.
Okay, well, thank you very much for speaking to us. That's Mohammed Ghunem joining us there on the line from Mansoura, where there've also been demonstrations in the last few days. As we again watch the live pictures on the left hand of your screen of Cairo, it's nighttime now, a curfew in place, but it's being largely ignored again tonight, as it's been the case in the last few days. There are thousands of people said to be in Tahrir Liberation Square right now. On the right hand of the screen are pictures from earlier in the day, earlier Thursday, when again there were clashes between the pro-democracy protesters and the so-called Mubarak supporters. But the clash is certainly not as intense as they were on Wednesday, when at least 13 people were killed in those demonstrations, in those clashes on Wednesday. Well, of course, the world's watching and reacting to the developments in Egypt. The U.S. State Department spokesman P.J. Crowley says there's nothing to suggest that the protests were being managed by so-called foreign elements, as the Egyptian government has accused. Let's take a listen.
As we said and made clear yesterday, it's vitally important for the government to reach out to representatives of Egypt's opposition and begin serious negotiations. That we think is a very clear imperative, and something that needs to be done now, so that the Egyptian people can see that there is a credible transition process underway. As we've stressed, as Robert Gibbs and I both stressed yesterday, this process needs to begin now.
All right, let's now speak to Dr. Omar Ashur, a lecturer in politics at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies at the University of Exeter. He joins us live from London. Thank you very much for speaking to us. You heard P.J. Crowley. I don't know if you were able to hear the British Foreign Secretary William Hague speak to us earlier. There still seems to be very unclear as to what position to take in this Egyptian crisis, the international community. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, to a large degree, but they moved a long way. If I remember, at the beginning of this crisis, the whole idea was Mubarak regime is a friendly regime and Mubarak regime is in control, so Egypt is stable. That we started from this position, from the Obama administration, and then it kept on moving and moving till what we see today, that transition has to happen immediately.
The language is certainly getting tougher. I agree with you. The language is much more tougher, but still they're not asking for Mubarak outright. They're not asking outright anyway for Mubarak to stand down.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But I think this is mainly they cannot come out and say this for diplomatic reasons and for the reasons for the relations that they had with Mubarak for a long time. But I can guarantee you, if Mubarak got out of Egypt, I don't think they would accept him on British soil or on American soil, just like the French did with Ben Ali.
Well, Mubarak certainly in his last speech indicated that he wouldn't be leaving Egypt anytime soon, so it'll be interesting to see if that ever happens. Let's talk about the political developments of the day. That's the Prime Minister speaking earlier and apologizing about the events on Wednesday, saying that there would be a thorough investigation. We've heard from the Vice President as well. Certainly, it's the first time in a lot of days that the regime has come out and spoken so much in just a matter of hours. What do you think they're trying to do here? They seem to be on damage control.
Yes, of course. If you see the Egyptian official TV, they are promising pensions for everybody. They're promising better bread for everybody. They're promising, change for everybody, and everything is rosy. But I don't know how does that work exactly, because what I heard from General Sulaiman, he's basically saying that Mubarak heard the demands of the people and discussed them and analyzed them, and he's giving his orders and so on and so forth, which is the same patronizing rhetoric with the superiority complex that we used to hear before from the regime's pillars. But the interesting part is I'm not sure which demands he's talking about, because the demands were very clear. There were 6 demands, and they include Mubarak's stepping down. They include the dissolution of the parliament, hiring a committee to rewrite the constitution, and a unity government to overlook a transitional period. After that, free and fair elections. And the trial of Habib al-Adli, that one was, we were told that it will happen. But the first demand was the stepping down of Mubarak, and I don't think he heard it at all. He didn't hear the 2 million people that were in Tahrir Square, or the millions of other Egyptians that were chanting against him and calling on him to step down. So what we saw in the second speech of Mubarak was, we heard the second speech, or the result, the conclusion of the second speech. An hour and a half earlier, John Kerry mentioned that Mubarak will not be running in elections in September 2011. And then an hour and a half later, Mubarak comes out and tells us the same thing. So he did exactly what John Kerry told him, but the millions of Egyptians that were calling on him to step down, he just did not, completely ignored them.
He hasn't heard their message yet. Well, we're getting a new line here that President Mubarak, in an interview with ABC News, a network in the United States, is saying that he's very unhappy over the fighting of the last few days. He's also quoted as saying in that interview, hopefully I can get it up in just a second, he's saying he wants to go but fears chaos. What do you make of that?
There is no way that this fighting could have occurred without the orders of the head of the regime, without the orders of Mubarak. Mainly because this is a very hierarchical regime. Nobody dares, no general dares to operate or take the initiative on his own. And if they did, they would have probably tapped on the back of Mubarak right now or earlier and told him Egypt cannot withstand you anymore. Like, the economic condition is in ruins, millions are in the streets. This situation is unsustainable if they had the initiative, but they don't. So this is a very hierarchical regime. Obviously, the police had orders to withdraw, as the professor that spoke before me mentioned. They just disappeared in a matter of hours. Egypt basically was without police. Nobody now investigated or had time to investigate who ordered thousands of convicted criminals to go out. And this is what, or to be released from prisons, and this happened throughout the crisis. Also, who stopped the army from intervening to stop the clashes? Yesterday, we saw Egyptians on Al Jazeera, begging the army to intervene and stop Mubarak's supporters from attacking them, and they couldn't do anything. It was really a shame.
Is there any indication
on the army officers there?
Is there any indication?
The Egyptian museum getting burned, and they're staying in their tanks.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you were talking about the army, and I in fact had a question about the army's position. Is there any indication at this stage what side will the army tilt to eventually? I mean, they can't certainly hold this position forever, can they?
I think there is a security dilemma within the army. The middle ranks and the low ranks have a lot of sympathy with the protesters, and we saw the pictures, and we know this for sure from a lot of evidence showing that. That's on one side. And the senior ranks, but they fear the senior ranks. They were trained this way to follow orders, not to think independently, not to take initiative until the order comes and then operate. So there is this conflict on the low ranks and the mid ranks. On the high ranks, we have another problem, is that they fear the situation gets out of control. So they fear, for example, ordering to the low ranks and the mid ranks to use violence, and you'll find a situation where you have a mutiny among the low ranks and the mid ranks because of the sympathy and because of the ties. So I guess they all fear each other at this position, and the situation is they're just waiting to see how, probably, what happens on Friday. I think tomorrow, if we saw millions of Egyptians going out again for the second week, calling on Mubarak to step down, and made it clear for the rest of the world that this cannot be sustainable on one side, and on the other side, the politicians, the leading politicians, just negotiate a way out of this crisis as a united front with very clear demands, and they have already very clear demands, but put a mechanism for this transition, and the US and its Western allies keep on their pressures, we might see a peaceful ending for this crisis by Friday night, and we might see the third speech of Mubarak, which will be pretty much equivalent to, hopefully, the third speech of Ben Ali and his departure afterwards.
Well, the language in any case, Omar, seems to be changing. If you know, I'm going to read this new line that's just dropped. Apparently, in an interview with ABC News in the United States, the Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak, has said that he fears chaos in Egypt if he steps down, and that he would like to leave office but cannot. This is his quote, Mubarak's quote, Omar. I'm just going to read it to you. He says, "I'm fed up. After 62 years in public service, I've had enough. I want to go." The language is changing.
Yeah, the language is changing. Of course, this is quite interesting, because he said in his second speech, that's why I'm saying it's following the Tunisian model exactly, the Ben Ali model. The first speech ignoring completely and promising to crack down. The second speech, a minor concession, but you know, a bit of an emotional element. I'm an old guy, I want to die here, and so on and so forth. And then after that, sending his thugs the next day. So this is what robbed him away of any sympathy of the Egyptians. And then the third speech is, we didn't see the third speech yet, but maybe it's just to the ABC. Maybe he doesn't want to talk to the Egyptian people anymore.
I think it's just, so far it's just an interview with ABC, but hopefully we'll get that soundbite soon enough. But it's certainly very interesting that these new lines are dropping now. So it could happen, things could happen very quickly in the next few hours. I just want to touch on once again Mubarak and his legacy. This is a man very much concerned about his legacy. In that second speech just a few days ago, he was talking about how he would want to not leave Egypt. He would die on Egyptian soil. This is a man concerned about his legacy. So maybe, and again, we're just speaking hypothetically here, maybe in order to keep up that legacy, he would be willing to negotiate an exit.
I think there is no face to save at that point. What happened under Mubarak is it was a disastrous period on Egypt, a period that was marked by social marginalization, economic deprivation, political repression, incredible brutality of the police, undermining the image of Egypt all over the globe, undermining its foreign policy, making problems with its neighbors. Really, it was a horrific period, and I think the Egyptian people want to put an end to this. And then the departure, his departure, assuming he departs, hopefully, is also horrific. How many people were killed for that? Like, you know, he saw the millions going down on the streets. He did not hear them. He sent his thugs and his central security forces to murder them. He released convicts from prisons, armed them, and then sent them out to create a situation of chaos. Very cunning, very diabolical in a sense. And then now, there is no face to save anymore. I think the end will be probably in the trash bin of history.
So you say there's no face-saving maneuvers anymore. And you mentioned the fact that he didn't hear the message of the protesters who took to the streets over the last 10 days or so. Do you think, to what degree do you think that you know, his regime, Mubarak, is taking into consideration what's being said by the outside world? Again, we've heard the language, the tone change from the United States, from the European Union. Do you think he's taking that into account?
I think this is the first account. As I just mentioned, Senator John Kerry asked him or negotiated with him not to go in September elections in 2011, and he came out an hour and a half later and told us that he won't. I think in 2005, there was no way presidential elections would have happened in 2005 without the U.S. pushing for it. So I think he takes the U.S. Specifically into a lot of account. Because for Egypt, like the Egyptian people, he has no problems killing a lot of them and repressing them. So I think the combination of millions in the streets, so he can't really kill millions, and you know, pressures from outside when they saw the millions. This is not a transition by the U.S. This is a transition by the Egyptian people, and because of their by the Egyptian youth specifically, by their presence in Tahrir Square, and by their courageousness and determination and resilience, and outmaneuvering a repressive autocrat that really is very versed in 30 years in power. They outmaneuvered him, and they stayed there, and they paid for this transition, and they paid for democracy and freedom with their blood and with their sweat and with their time. And now the US and the West is sympathizing and move, remove sympathizing, more or less putting pressure on Mubarak to... hello?
Yes, can you hear me? It's fine. We'll leave it there for now, Omar. We'll come back to you in just a few minutes because I understand that you're with us perhaps for another hour.